This is the Ad Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am located in Scoodic, in the traditional and unceded territory of the Passamaquoddy people. Well, hey everyone, welcome to episode 97 of the Ad Non-Tech Podcast. I am Matt Stranick. This is Dr. Doug Reed. We're sure tickled and delighted that you're here joining us wherever and whenever you happen to be checking this out. Really glad to have you along. And today we're into a topic which I think we inadvertently come back to. We've come full circle on this in terms of terminology, in terms of definitions. It's always important that we get our I's dotted and our T's crossed and everything else. And we're going into that just a little bit more with this here episode. It's going to be a good one, I think. And you may have a look behind me. You may have a gander at old Boney Maroney back here. That may give you some inadvertent clues if you're really paying attention, or perhaps connecting the dots post-episode or what have you. But before we get too far into that, I just wanted to say, hey, Doug, how are things? How are you doing? How's life treating you as we're inching closer to the springtime, my friend?
I'm doing pretty good. It's, it's that weird time of year where no matter what clothes you wear, they're the wrong clothes. It's kind of like that. Like I'm grabbing one coat in the morning, and then it's definitely the wrong coat in the afternoon. And I'm doing that with walking the dogs. We've had like a day and a half of rain. So
okay,
we had a lot of snow, and now we have a lot of slushy stuff on top of ice. So it's one of those things. This is not me complaining. This is me just saying, yep, looking forward to it. Was looking at the garden this morning to say, what am I planting? And realized I'm already behind because people have already got stuff going in their houses and greenhouses. So it's a good time. How about you?
It is.
How are things?
Couldn't be better if I wanted them to, which I don't, quite frankly. All's well here in scenic Charlotte County, New Brunswick, where I've been posted up lately. Anything I'd have to say by way of complaint would be completely negligible and uncalled for, quite frankly. So I have nothing more specific, I suppose, to add to that, besides which may come up kind of tangentially in the course of these here comments. I do appreciate what you're saying about the in-between sort of season that we're in. I was glumping around in sneakers, and then I kind of wished I'd had some boots because of the puddle and muck situation. And yeah, anyway, as you say, it's not quite one thing, not quite another in terms of how you carry yourself when you're out there in the world, as it were. The springtime, it's coming. It's less than 2 weeks, less than 2 full weeks from the actual vernal equinox. So that's exciting stuff as far as it goes here in the Maritimes, at least my part of it anyways. So Doug,
and are you looking at BC with jealousy with what they did today, or envy?
It's an interesting thing, folks. We are recording this on the day of, at least in Prince Edward Island, at least in New Brunswick, the annual spring forward in terms of the time change, where you lose an hour, is how I'm looking at it. And in BC, my understanding is that as of today, they didn't do that. Is that the case, Doug?
They're never changing again. today was the last day. They're never
Today was the last
changing.
time they're going to change.
I'm pretty
Pretty
sure. I'm pretty
Okay.
sure. Because I remember
right,
living there and they said, oh yeah, as soon as the Western United States stops changing, we're going to stop. And apparently with the way things are, they've said, forget it. We're just stopping. We're not waiting for them anymore.
So now Saskatchewan has
Never
their
changed.
own way of doing that too, right? So kind of coming online, I suppose, with elsewhere in Western Canada. It's going to be an interesting thing for me at some point, if it's not already the case, that being 5 hours different from
Oh,
where my
right.
kids happen to
Yes.
be, that's pretty
Yeah.
good amount of time. But yeah, I tend to think this whole shifting the time around as per it's to do with the farmers and the crops, isn't it, Doug?
Nope, that's BS. That's not true.
Okay.
That's not what it was. If you want to know, I know. But the farmers get blamed. It has nothing to do with them.
Okay.
It was in World War One. It was all about how much power they had to spend heating factories and having lights on and all that stuff.
Oh.
And so if they shifted things, it saved the war machine money. Basically, I'm overgeneralizing, but that's basically what it is. And somehow the poor farmers got thrown under the bus, and they've been getting blamed for over 100 years or whatever it is now.
Well, dang. I had no sweet clue about that, Doug. That's absolutely news to me, as I'm sure it perhaps is to old Bones back here. And so, having set that up so interestingly, Doug, perhaps we could speak to the topic at hand for this episode, because I'm really fascinated at where you see this topic coming from, as you have come up with the topic, and where and why for you're bringing it up now.
Okay, the way this works is the topic is naming things in education dash the Thagomizer. And if you don't know, I've included a copy of Gary Larson's Fireside cartoon in the notes. It's from the 80s, and it's basically a bunch of cavemen, and they're pointing at something and saying, that's called the Thagomizer. And it was just the spikes on the tail of a stegosaurus. And it was like named after the late Thag Simmons. And that was it. It was a one-off joke. It was one day. It was there and it was gone. And this has taken a life of its own. And the reason it came to me this way is a couple of weeks ago, one of my uncles passed away. And at his funeral, after his funeral, you know, you have that thing where you meet all the people you haven't seen in years. And his son, one of my cousins, is a paleontologist in Manitoba. So yeah, Dr. Mark McDougall. And he said, oh, he listened to our podcast as he was driving across the country. And I was like, well, isn't that cool? That's awfully nice. Right? But we're ed tech and he's paleontology, so he'll probably never hear this. But it's one of those things, right? I thought it was nice. And then I got paleontology in my head, and I keep coming back to naming things in education. And then, of course, the Fireside cartoon floats around in there too. And I'm like, let's put this baby together. We put all the pieces together, and here we are. We're at the episode. And this is going to be slightly different. I normally have about 5 articles I talk to, and this time it's 4 articles, but I'm hoping I can give you a little quiz at the end. Like in the notes, I've got what words are and what they mean and stuff. So if you don't scroll down, I'm just going to ask you. I'm going to say the word, and I'm going to see if you know what it is, just because I'm a super nerd. I hope you don't mind. Not to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
I'm more than happy to be put on the spot in such manner, Dr. Reed. And may I add my condolences to your late uncle, your family member.
Thanks. Thanks. He was a good guy. But colon cancer is colon cancer, right? So get tested, even though he was getting tested. It's one of those things. Yeah, so that stinks. But at least I can do this in his honor tonight. So
Well, absolutely. And appreciating the personal context here, right? Appreciating that all of this endeavor comes from a pretty specific personal spot. And sometimes that personal influence is more direct than others. So, really appreciate what we're putting forward here, Doug. Appreciate the context for that, my friend.
thanks. Now I'm going to jump into the first article from 1972
Please
because
do.
we are the Ed Non-Tech podcast. So I went looking for educational technologist. When was the first time that got used? In Geis and Klassen in 1972, it's a word, it's a name, it's an educational technologist. In the 12th year of the Educational Technology Journal. So I just thought that was kind of neat that it was like self-referential the way it was going around. I thought that was pretty neat. And the authors say this article is concerned with what people in our area of expertise are or wish to be called. What would you look under in the yellow pages if you wanted to find one? So first, for all the young people, the yellow pages was a thing. And I still have, PEI still has the yellow pages. I have one over here. It's just a place that you would go to. It was very pre-internet. The internet wiped it out, but it was just, here's everybody's phone numbers. Call whoever you want. It's kind of wacky now. I don't want people to have my phone number. But back in the day, everybody in town got a copy of what my phone number was. Anyway, you had
to pay money to have an unlisted number.
Yes.
It was they published it whether you wanted them to or not, and if you really didn't, you paid a fee to your telephone utility, and they refrained from publishing it in the white pages. And as I recall, the NBTEL edition of it anyway, because New Brunswick was a smaller area, had the white pages with then the yellow pages kind of as a supplement of various sizes within the same volume. But every year it showed up on our doorstep. It was kind of foisted on you almost by the telephone utility, by the postal company. And seems a bit anachronistic now, but in its own way, that kind of speaks to some of the problems, if you will, with naming things. And I think also it's in microcosm, sort of the dinosaur-esque age, right? The informing of the Thagomizer.
Thagomizer is how I pronounce it.
There we go. Right.
Now, something else that's interesting about these yellow pages are how names worked in that. Like in the yellow pages, like you wanted pizza, you would flip to the food section, flip to the pizza section, and then they'd be in alphabetical order, which is why there were pizza shops that were AA pizza, and then AAA pizza, and then AAAA pizza. It had not like you. It was there so that they'd be first alphabetically. That's so all of these places were naming things to game the system because they know it's like if you go to on a web search now, right? How many people go to the third page of a web search? That's not happening, right? If you're not on the first page, forget it. So they were gaming the system to get their name higher up the rankings. So anyway, back to Geis and Klassen. It's what's really neat. It's a word, it's a name, it's an educational technologist. And they're excited that they've coined this phrase and got it published. It's like, okay, so are we educational?
With some echoes of the Superman comic sort of framing for those who may not necessarily remember that or have known about it in the first place. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's a word, it's a name. It's kind of got a nice semantic underpinning to it there. So
yeah, they did a great job with that. They really, really did. But this was the first time I could really dig into educational technologist and the naming portion of things. And then in that capture that I have, there's also a William Shakespeare quote about names and a Gertrude Stein quote about names. So they brought out the heavy hitters to go with it, right? If Superman wasn't good enough, let's drop some Shakespeare. Oh, Bill Shakespeare will do a bit. And then Gertrude Stein's also there, some more timely reference in 1972. So it was just neat that we went into the names the way we did. So I just really liked finding this.
And as you've alluded to, and as I mentioned in the wind up there at the beginning, we do periodically, it seems, come back to definitions. It seems we come back to re-examining or unpacking jargon in whatever way. It's kind of a mandate of the show to take quasi-academic or quasi-technical terms and concepts and open them up a bit and speak to them in a way that hopefully renders them maybe a little bit more accessible or causes people to think about them a little bit differently. And so actually putting this kind of focus on the practice of naming itself, I just think it is in keeping with what we've been trying to do throughout the life of the show thus far.
And just so you know, O'Brien, Lehman, and Duffy in 2014 agreed with what you just said.
Fantabulous.
They published an article in the QUT Law Review, and it was called The Power of Naming, the Multifaceted Value of Learning Students' Names. And this article was so interesting to me because I had a parallel experience when I was a prof in Australia, where I had to sit. I think I complained about this once or twice or a bunch of times about how I just got a PhD in education. I'd been in the classroom all those years, and then they made me do a teaching course, a how to teach course. And I wasn't the best student because I was choked and I was full of myself. But literally, I think I even used this reference a couple of episodes ago, where they brought in somebody that had won the University Teaching Award a couple of years earlier. And he said, the best thing you can do is get to know students' names. They really like that. And they like it even more if you tell them your name. So this guy's advice was, first day, go up to the board and put your name on it so the students know who you are. And I'm like, oh, is that where we're at? That's the level that we have to get to. Oh, like I couldn't breathe. Like it was like I sucked in all that air. I couldn't breathe at that. But now I'm using it, whatever, 20 years later. So it works out okay. But what O'Brien et al. Do is they dig right in. Naming is humanizing, personalizing, and community building, which I agree with. Naming creates a relationship, even at the very beginning. And it's like, yeah, it does. It does. How many sports teams do we have that have names? Right? It's like it's not just the town name or the community name. There's also the Lions, the Bearcats, the Lightning, the Cougars, the whatever, the Penguins, and it goes on and on.
And in some cases, some of these sports teams have been named perhaps anachronistically, named after, for instance, I'm thinking the Cleveland Indians, where now they're the Cleveland Guardians, are they not?
Yes.
There's a few variations of that in the sport. There are a few holdouts in the sport, but there are some places where it's still pretty deeply entrenched, where you're having names which, if they were just coming up with them straight up now, they wouldn't call them that, right? And so there is some manner of paying respect or lack of respect. Who gets privileged by such terms? It does kind of put me in the mind a bit of the book that I read over the summer, The History of the Concept of Technology, where it sort of went from referring to a sort of hybrid concept, which broadly covered those who were artisans, who sort of made crafts with their hands, And then over time, through usage and how it came to be used, more associated with industrial processes, more associated with industrial techniques. And now it just seems like this kind of ubiquitous paradigm that, because we're all so deeply enmeshed in our ways with online and wireless and mobile applications of various kinds, the notion of technology, well, what does it even mean now? What does that word even refer to? So naming, putting names on things. I mean, anybody who's a parent may have struggled a bit, or you can go down so many rabbit holes in terms of my son, my younger son, Kai. If you look up what that name or what that word refers to, well, we did a Wikipedia check, and that one syllable word, KAI, means something different in about 5 or 6 or more different languages. And so part of why we thought it was a nice thing to name him that was because it had all these connotations associated with the different uses of that one syllable phrase, that one syllable word, across many different cultural contexts. We thought that that was something that we were kind of giving to them almost in advance, kind of as a gift of sorts.
Yeah, that makes sense. My name is Douglas, and it means of the dark water in Gaelic. And it's also connected to the Douglas fir tree that stands tall and solitary. And it's like, yeah, I might have picked up a few of those. Some of that might have rubbed off on me. So the naming of things matters so much. And another thing that the O'Brien article talks about is the act of naming oneself as a learner is a complex one, which opens up issues related to position, recognition, and power. And I find that is so true. Anytime people say, oh, I'm just learning, they're opening themselves up in a vulnerable way. Right? I'm not really good at it. It's like that, the default when you're a grad student and you get somebody to read your stuff. Look, I know it's not very good, but can you take a look? Right? Like the default, oh, it's a draft. It's all the defaults that are built into what are we actually saying? All these shorthand little mentions.
Absolutely. So, positionality, the amount of work you put into something, how you identify yourself, formative versus finished. There's so many aspects to it. And having come out on the other side of doctoral programs and years of being educators and the like as we have, I'm always really pleased at how we kind of keep repeating a theme of lifelong learning throughout the show, even as recently as the past few months, where I spent some time working in an after school kind of setting with special needs or inclusive learning kind of settings. You can see how much what you call things and people and how it really matters a lot in terms of giving young people a good way forward, because there are so many different socio-economic contexts, you could say, right? There's so much disparity. For instance, if we're talking perhaps about the educational opportunities which might be afforded to somebody in a major Canadian or North American urban kind of environment, as opposed to perhaps in a rural area or in a First Nations reserve where they're short of infrastructure, short of resources. And so being somebody who's in an educational setting means something different depending on the context. And so I think you're quite right here to point to that vulnerability and to point to how much that really means in terms of opening yourself up, Doug.
Yeah, and I think kudos to people that do. I am a firm believer that when we stop learning, we start dying. I
Very much
always
so.
want to know more things. I always, always, always. Sometimes I don't like what I learn, but that's life too, right? That still gives me more context for what's going on. Now to come back to e-learning and ed tech, we've talked about this resource before. It's Weller 2018, 20 years of ed tech. And I know I'm a huge fan of it. And last time we talked, you were a huge fan. We even talked about doing a whole episode just on that article, or that book, but that hasn't happened yet. Who knows? Maybe in the future. But with Weller, what Weller did is he described e-learning. E-learning has been used as a term for some time since 1999, but the rise of the web and the prefix of E to everything came to prominence. For people that weren't alive, it was a wacky time. That was right around the time that everybody was excited about Gregorian chants for a month. It just was. It's like, oh, e-business, e-learning, like e-penmanship, right? E-everything. That was sexy. That was the way you got business funding. That was the way you did marketing. It's almost like BMO now, Bank of Montreal Online. The O is for online. It's like, no, it's Bank of Montreal. Why is the O still there? Anyway, that's my issue. But this is part of the naming that we were talking about. And it's the same as what's happened with ed tech, right? It used to be educational technology, educational technologist, and it got shortened to ed tech that we make fun of on a pretty regular basis. And we bang around names, especially when we named our podcast. So do you have any other E's that you remember? Because I know I had a couple, but
Well, e-commerce for sure. That one's still
Yes.
pretty widely used. That's actually probably gained more steam over the years. E-sports at Keanu
Right.
College, where I spent some time, they actually have like a full-on e-sports varsity program where that's still very much what they call it, right? Part of the jargon. I'm sure there are others, but those are the two that most immediately come to mind for me.
yeah, it's just let's attach it, and everybody knows what the E means, right? Everybody knows it's got some kind of electronic or some kind of internet-y thing going on. So it's just one of those things. It was at that age. That's why it got named that, because at that time that's what we were doing. Or I wasn't doing it. I was following along like everybody else, but
It's just one of those things that now kind of has a built-in redundancy that we still aren't quite getting rid of. Like if you use Microsoft Word, it's still got the little floppy disk icon associated with the save function. There's some things where it's like, what even is that? You have to ask somebody who's 20 years old, what is that? What does that, besides saving on your computer, like what does that, what's the reference there, right? It's something like that.
and that still annoys me. What you just said, it wasn't a floppy, right? I used floppy disks, and you'd held them in your hand, and they were like the strength of like a
Rectangular
file folder.
widgets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was that? War Games, that movie from the early 80s. There was a War Games movie. Do you
I think it actually was called War
play
Games.
games? Right? They had
With
the
Matthew
big
Broderick.
floppies. Yeah,
Yep.
they had the big floppies that were like 11 inches wide or something. And the other floppies are like 5.5 inches wide. 5.5s are what I was used to. And I was shocked when they went to the little icon that became, or the size that became the save icon.
Right.
Right? It was like, whoa, what's this? This thing's solid. I don't have to, like, I could put that in my bag. It'll be okay. I don't have to worry about it getting folded or anything like that.
I remember as a child when the Tandy desktop computer came into our home, and taking those black floppy disks
Yep.
and booting DOS in the machine so that the machine would then be able to run another program. And then you put a secondary disk with the program you wanted to open or use onto it. And there may even have been a thingamajig where you would then take one of the disks out. So if you wanted to save your work, right, that would be yet another disk that went into the unit. My memory is maybe a bit fogged on some of those details, but definitely booting it up from scratch each time off a disk because the machine didn't have anything other than just basic operating RAM, right? So,
Yeah. So for me, if we're going to keep naming conventions, let's say we're in charge of naming stuff. We've got the floppy disks, the old bendable ones, the 5.5 inchers. Then we go to the next ones that could actually hold a meg of memory, which is awesome. And they weren't floppy, they were solid, but they were still called floppy disks. Does that mean that USB, like solid state drives, USB thumb drives, should be floppy thumb drives? Is that, how come we lost floppy there? Right? It's like if we
for
went
that
from
matter,
something
why
that
don't
was
they have a
floppy to
little
not.
CD symbol for a CD-ROM, right? Which were
Yeah.
used for storage for quite a while.
Well, that's it. Yeah. Like I remember the old discs. A buddy of mine had an old Tandy, one of the very first ones, and his was a tape player. And you had to be quiet, right? Because if you talked while that thing was record or saving, everything screwed up. It didn't save correctly. And I got in trouble once or twice. And well, I was whatever, 10 or 12 or 13 or something. But it was just, yeah. So we've gone through all of this stuff. I don't understand why floppy only survived one generation of non-floppy stuff. Like we went to the big reel-to-reel tapes that you see in movies from the 1960s to tape decks. Because I remember the tape deck ones, like the cassette tapes. And then a couple of generations of floppy disks, then a less than floppy disk, USB. Now, do we even have that? What do people do, right? They just throw it to the cloud and away we go. Should it be the floppy cloud? I don't know, I'm being ridiculous.
Floppy
but
cloud. That's a good one. I think if I had my druthers, we could name something that. That's good. The floppy cloud.
Okay. I'm putting that down. We're naming something the floppy cloud.
Fantastic. I've been watching a bit of a series. My friend, the person I'm living with now, she watched The Sopranos on HBO when it first came out back in the day. I'd never watched it before, and so we're kind of making our way through it. We watched 3 or 4 episodes, but there are aspects of the show. It's masterfully told. I mean, it's just a really compelling, funny, weird narrative throughout the show, but it's so, in some aspects, wedded to the late 1990s when it was first on the air. And so there was one episode where 2 of the teenagers in the Soprano home were using the late 1990s internet and going to a website. And it's like, wow, that is really how far we've come. And yet, in some ways, not so much, right? But seeing those kinds of representations of technology, or it was one of those shows where they still had a landline in the home, and it was like a plot point where I tried to call them, they didn't answer. What's going on? There wasn't the ubiquitous cell phone everywhere. Or one of the tropes of the show is Tony's going to use a payphone to call out to somebody because the landline, right? And the telephone in his home can't be trusted.
Can't be trusted.
Yeah.
The if you ever listen to the Office Ladies podcast, when they replay episodes and talk about them, they always say old tech alert whenever it's look at how old that phone was, or look at that fax machine, or look at that whatever it happened to be. And it's just interesting, the old tech, how the technology dates things. It used to be cars. Like if you see the first couple of minutes of a movie and you're like, oh, that's from the 60s. Because those were cars from the 60s. It's just, one of those kind of things, right? Certain things that date us and give people information about things. You just see the cars whizzing by, and you know how old. It gives context. It comes back to the concept that you said earlier. So I want to jump to article number 4. Donahue, Rickard, Holden, Blackwell, and Calkin using EdTech to enhance learning. And it's in the International Journal of the Whole Child in 2019. And they say something so nicely and so concisely that I've been chipping away at for 97 episodes, I guess. And so we're not talking about educational technology anymore. We're talking about EdTech now, right? So, and EdTech is not just about education or about technology. Much of it's also about business. Behind the education sector, where students and educators interact, like a kind of shadow education industry. And I really love that concept because you can see them all. I'm sure one of them's that they're all sitting around a big table and one of them stroking a white cat, that kind of thing. A shadow industry of business managers, market forecasters, deal makers, investors, venture philanthropists, and private equity firms. They are not there to help people learn. They are there to make money. That's what they're doing. Some of them might be wanting to help, and good on them. But I think the primary focus of that is how do we make more money?
Absolutely. And where, at least in Canada, can't really speak for other places, but the vast majority of accredited post-secondary institutions are publicly funded. So for these tech companies, these private venture firms, they have nothing to do but rake in the dough off of the public sector, right? Off of largely provincial monies that come in to support these institutions. And yeah, we've definitely spoken to the questionable capitalist enterprise which goes into this, the tech bros of Silicon Valley and the like. Gross stereotypes, to be sure, but as you say, these are for-profit institutions or organizations raking money off of the public dollar. And even in the case of open source technology such as Moodle and what have you, still there's plugins, there's associated infrastructure, there's consultants, there's the whole
Programmers.
IT side of it that monetizes providing the service to the end user and making it as efficient as possible from a profitability standpoint.
Yeah. So from this article, I'm going to stop using the phrase EdTech as much as I do. And I'm going to go back to educational technology, because educational technology to me is still about students and still about learning, where EdTech really has been co-opted, right? The shadow industry has got control of that name. And I'm tired. Every time I bring it up online, I just get brigaded. I just get hammered. So I'll just go back to educational technology. It's just easier. I could type the
Well, and there is some actual history, as we're seeing, associated with the term. There's practice, which is fed into it. And if you wanted to even probably look at it from the standpoint of educational media, right? If you want to go back to your projector or your film sort of presentation with the plastic sheets, right?
Yeah.
Those machines.
The overhead projectors, yeah.
There we go, sure. And up to and including contemporary online technologies, right? So that through line of tradition and practice is significant, I think. And so good on you for going with the term which most directly contains that sense of history and practice inside of it.
Yeah, but I got sucked in. EdTech. That I like that name better. right? That just rolls off the tongue better. It just does. Oh yeah, what do you do? Oh, I'm an ed tech. That's way easier than, oh, I'm an educational technology. It's like, can we
I
throw a couple of more
practice
syllables in there?
educational technology. It's
Yeah,
ed tech. It's whiz bang. It'll
absolutely.
clean your dishes. It'll shine your shoes. It'll make you smile brighter. It's like Gleamanex, that product that the Joker came up with in the 1989 Batman. Gleamanex.
Yes.
That's it. Ed tech. A little bit
Yeah.
of bang for your buck, right? That's catchphrase. Simplified. Reduce, right? It's reductionist almost. It's how
It
can you
really
boil
is.
it down and de-skill something and make it as now as to the lowest common denominator as possible so that anybody can understand it and no educational knowledge required to really get behind it. There's a lot of semantic baggage that goes along with it. So good on you, Doug. I think that is something to really consider on here.
Thanks. What you just described there, I really appreciate that because that reminds me of Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury. Because that whole story, I really love the story. I read it years ago. I'll have to go back and reread it. It's in a box someplace here. But it's such a great story. And part of all that is I remember listening to an interview Ray Bradbury gave, and he talked about how reductionist everything is. All of a sudden, there were no novels. It was all stories that could be read in 15 minutes. And then it was ideas that could be one sound bite, and it just squished it down. So like information literacy basically didn't exist. He didn't call it that, but that was his concept. So it's like, yeah, that's kind of the way the world is headed. So I'm going to take a backward step. I'm going to try anyway, but I still love the name of the podcast. I think the Ed Non-Tech podcast would be better than the education non-technology podcast. That's too much.
Well, it's almost a term that we've kind of co-opted and turned a bit on itself. So it's a little
Yeah.
bit critical of its own naming. It's a little bit ed non-tech. Well, it's definitely not ed tech. Maybe there's a problem with ed tech where they're calling it ed non-tech. So in as much as we're not trying to stir the pot, but perhaps provide some alternative standpoints or maybe look at things in a way that's unique to us that maybe we haven't seen represented in other areas or other avenues too much. I do like how we have framed it and how, as we're marching boldly towards episode 100, that we're circling back, that we're looking at our opening positions and questioning their validity in a way. That's an important part of any viable creative or intellectual exercise, in my opinion.
Yeah. I hate just believing stuff to believe it. It drives me nuts.
Absolutely.
Another thing that happened at my uncle's funeral is I overheard one of my aunts having a conversation with somebody, and she's like, "Oh, I was wrong about that. I thought this was the case, whatever it happened to be." And it just reminded me because she had so much information when I was growing up. It was like she always had the answer to everything. She's one of those people. I have a lot of aunts, so I'm not picking on one person in general. But she told me stuff that I believed for decades until the internet. And then I could start looking stuff up to find out, okay, she wasn't accurate about this. And it's another thing with this whole concept of investigating and examining what we know. Because it's like, okay, well, we know that's true. And it's like, do we? Do we know that's true? What, are you sure that's true? And it was nice that she had something wrong from 40, 50 years ago, whatever it was, where she'd put that knowledge into her head. I just thought it was amusing.
Her authority did not necessarily come from having an exact specific knowledge per se. It came from who she was as a person and how she carried herself and
Yes.
her lived experience and her worldview that made whatever she said. If it wasn't true, maybe it should have been, right? Maybe. So
So what I'm going to do, because those are the 4 articles, so I'm going to ask you not to scroll down any further in your notes. Wicked. I could trust you. I know I could trust you. So that's fine. What I've done in the notes, so if people go to the website, they can take a look and see what I'm about to do. I have a couple of words that are almost all, there's one that isn't, almost all about education and technology. And I'm just going to ask you if you know what they are and where the name came from.
Sure, go ahead.
So if I start with Gestetner, do you know what that is?
I know what that is. That's actually a proto photocopier. It's sort of a hybrid personal printing apparatus. The reason I know that is because my dad, when he was a teenager back in the early 70s, owned one, and him and some of his pals made a little community newsletter for his general cohort. I can't remember if it was in Germany when they were on the Force Base there, or when they had moved to Chatham to see Canadian Air Force Base Chatham. But yeah, the Gestetner printing machine. That's something I was aware of from my dad, not from any firsthand knowledge.
And that was a brand name.
There we
Gestetner
go.
was the big company that. It's kind of like when people say Xerox, I got to go Xerox something. Right? It's like, no, you want a photocopy. Xerox may not be what you want. Right? You may not have a Xerox. You might have something else. Anyway, Wiki. Do you know where Wiki got its name?
Okay, I know what a wiki is because that was actually when I entered education and educational technology. I literally used wikis for some of my BEd internship model or projects for the students, the internships, right, where you go into the schools.
Yep.
And it was considered. So the folks that I worked with, the longer term high school and junior high school teachers, they thought it was pretty terrific. These personal, easily manipulated websites.
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling to recall why they called it a wiki.
Can you give me what language it's from then? Just because I'm putting you on the spot. We're on a game show. It is not English or French or Gaelic.
I'm not going to get it, Doug. Tell me.
Hawaiian. Wiki means quick. And so they cut that in half because they thought wiki was too long. And then they just called it wiki. And it was just for those web pages or those documents that multiple people can edit.
Right.
So that's where the wiki came from. It came from Hawaii. And I was in Hawaii at a conference one time, and my buddy ran out in front of a bus to get a picture because it had wiki bus on the front. I don't remember if it was on the bus itself or it was on the wall right next to it. But anyway, it's a word in Hawaii.
Quick. Okay. Awesome.
How about OER?
Well, Open Educational Resource, I think, is right the acronym you're referring to there.
That was bang on, man. You couldn't have been more right. This one, I think we've talked about this one in the past. I didn't know what the letter stood for, so I apologize, but SCORM. Have you ever heard of a SCORM object?
SCORM and SCORM packages. It's a file standard, but I know the O stands for object.
Yep.
I don't know the rest of it. So why didn't you enlighten me here, Doug?
I wouldn't have known either. It's Shareable Content Object Reference Model. It's like,
Okay.
who named that? That was not a linguist that named that. This one you should already know. I think we talked about this about 78 episodes ago. It was podcast. Where did the term podcast come from?
I'm not sure where the hybridized form came from, Doug, I gotta say.
It was personal on-demand cast.
What?
Is where that came from in 2006. So
I was not thinking of that as being an acronym at the front of it whatsoever. I was thinking Bean Pod or something organic.
Oh, yeah.
But no. Okay.
Something closer to home is RSS. What?
Really simple.
Oh.
No.
Yeah, you're there, man. You're there.
Really simple syndication.
Well done.
Okay.
I could not remember that. It was like
RSS feeds, right?
RSS feeds, yes. Really simple syndication. It's like, there we go. I could give you another easy one, like a PIN number. What's a PIN number?
Personal identification.
What's the N?
Personal identification. I don't know now that I think of it.
It's personal identification number. So when we say PIN number, we're saying personal identification number.
It's redundant. Yeah,
it's redundant.
Just be saying, what's your PIN?
Yeah. Okay. What's your PIN words, unless you want to add the second number for stutterers, I guess. It's it's one of these things. There's a couple more in there, and you've been a good sport, so I'm not.
Thank you. I appreciate that. That was fun.
The very last one.
Play along at home, folks. This is good.
The very last one was really fun for me because it's the one that doesn't have anything to do with ed tech, but it has everything to do with educational technology, and it's NAP. Necessary Adult Pause. I really enjoyed that one. I don't know if that was actually accurate, but and it's one of those things. Now there's basically 4 different ways to name stuff. 4 different ways you get to name things. One is pay money to name it. One is to invent something. So, do you know how Petri dish got its name?
The name of the scientist, I'm assuming.
Yeah, diesel engine. Again, same deal. And then here's the ugly one. Graphics interface format. The person that came up with that one, have you ever seen that before? GIF? GIF or GIF?
I'm aware of what the GIF is. We have a number of GIFs embedded in the WordPress post that goes along with these notes. But is that actually to do with somebody's name as a person?
That's actually to do with somebody who invented it and they named it. So a lot of times it's somebody's name, but I put that in there because the person that came up with it calls it GIF, like GIF. And linguists hate that. They think it should be GIF with a hard G, not a soft J sound. But I did some looking into it, and Jif is where they came from with it because it's the same as that brand of peanut butter. And they used to talk about having it done in a GIF. Right?
GIFF. Right.
Yeah.
Short for Jiffy. Short for quickly. Yeah. Jiffy.
Yeah.
GIF. Yeah.
So there's 2 ways to look at that, but the person that created the first one apparently or ran the lab named it. Another way is to discover something. Like people that discover comets get to name it.
Yep.
If you make a mathematical proof, you get to name it, right? Life forms. If you discover a life form nobody's ever seen, you get to name it. And I included the link up above. if you ever find something, the International Commission on Zoological Nomenclature, that's the link you click. Go try to name it. Just FYI.
I embedded that as an iframe into the post for these notes. Why do we call it an iframe? Beats the heck out of me, but we do, where you can actually click on the interface of that website as sort of a window within the post for these notes, the WordPress.
The last way you get to name things is to get famous. And for example, because the Thagomizer is all about this episode, Gary Larson, the creator of The Far Side, the cartoonist, he's got 3 different things named after him. He's got a louse, a butterfly, and a beetle. The beetle is Gary Larsinus. The butterfly is Ceratoterga larsoni, and the louse is Strigophilus Gary Larsoni. So this is a whole bunch of scientists saying, we love this so much, we wanted to honor you. So somebody else discovered it, and they put his name on it to honor him and what he did.
Standing on the shoulders of giants, as it were. Very impressive.
Well, that goes along the same lines as 2 other people that weren't real people, but they were fictional characters. Have you ever heard of the Scully effect? Have you? The
No,
X-Files?
But I'm charmed that such a thing exists.
The number of women in sciences that have said, why did you get into science? When asked, it was Dana Scully from the X-Files. That was like a role model they could see. So the Scully effect is there. And then the other one is Montgomery Scott from Star Trek. The number of engineers, there was engineering schools that gave James Doohan, the actor, gave him honorary degrees because when they brought in engineering students to say, why did you become an engineer? It was like Scotty from Star Trek. And at one point, there was one school that more than half the students said, I want to be an engineer because of Scotty from Star Trek. So the naming of things and the demonstration of stuff, it matters. And I know it's slightly off the Thagomizer kind of topic, but
it's riffing on the Thagomizer. It's the power of story, the power of narrative, I think, which is important here.
Yes. So it matters. The naming of things matter. And there's a bunch of naming stories in there, and there's a whole bunch of cool stories, right? Sometimes stuff gets named to insult people. Sometimes it's marketing to make them feel better about themselves. Sometimes it's making fun of people that aren't good at stuff, right? Did you ever read Where the Wild Things Are?
Definitely.
By Morris Sendak?
And I read it to my kids. Yep.
Yes. That's not the original name of the story. The original name of the story was The Land of Wild Horses, but he couldn't draw horses. So he drew monsters and he changed the story because he was doing the art. It's just, you couldn't call it Land of Wild Horses and have a bunch of monsters in it. So you had to change it to something else. Even other little things.
Doug.
It's like decibel. You know what a decibel is? Like that measurement, that unit of measurement for sound?
I'm not aware of the story behind it, Doug.
The B, when you see decibel abbreviated, it's a small d for deci and a capital B for bell. It's like, why is it small and then capitalized? That doesn't make sense. It was named for Alexander Graham Bell. And Bell was a proper name. That's why the B is capitalized. So that's why it's a small d for deci, capital B. I'm such a nerd with this stuff. I love this stuff. It was just one of those things.
Well, the history of language and education is full of these such interesting quirks and quarks, if you will, right? So
if listeners go to the website There's about a dozen of them there. Here's
Yep.
some other abbreviated stories that I liked, which I thought were humorous. And please feel free to go take a look.
Please do.
And all I've got left are some images. I have one image that I love more than all the others, but I'm wondering,
Okay.
is there anything there that you really enjoyed?
Well, they're all clever and by turns interesting and engaging, but I'm seeing, well, I've seen quite a number of words for the first time in the course of this past hour or so, I'll have to say. But I do like the image that you have here to go with the word philomath, someone who is passionate about acquiring knowledge and constantly seeking to learn new things. I dig that. I like the fact that there's a word for that. I like to consider myself a philomath, I suppose, and I didn't know that there was such a word, but I'm glad that there is.
Yeah, I thought you might like that one.
Absolutely.
And I like it too. I think this goes really well with natural philosopher. If we were alive 250 years ago, we wouldn't have been scientists. We would have been natural philosophers. That sort of thing, because that word hadn't been invented. Now, I want to come back to the title of this episode one last time.
Totally.
And one of the images in here I took is a screen capture of the beginning of an article, and it's a Taylor 2010, and it's the Shinosaurus Tail Club revisited spikes and complex distal caudals. And it's like, okay, why did I put that there? And there's the title, right? It's whatever this publication was. Here's the citation, and here's an image of what it looks like. So somebody drew out what the big tail looks like the Thagomizer kind of tail. But the key words in this is what caught me. If you look at the key words, it's caudal fusion, monitor lizards, Shinosaurus, and Thagomizer. He put Thagomizer, I think it's a he. If I'm wrong, I apologize. Maybe she. He or she put Thagomizer in the keywords. So when people were searching Thagomizer, they would find this article. It never mentions Thagomizer again, but they are talking about tail clubs on dinosaurs.
Thagomizer adjacent, as it were.
Thagomizer adjacent, but enough to put in the keywords for people to find on the search. So now I'm hoping our keywords will include Thagomizer. So if somebody does a search, they'll find this episode. But because Thagomizer, there was no name for it when Gary Larson created his cartoon. And I put his cartoon in here too. That's been a term that's been picked up. When I went to Google Scholar, there's 104 articles that use the term Thagomizer. These are peer-reviewed articles. These are academic. they exist. 104 articles that have a reference to Thagomizer. Like this one just throws it in a keyword. They don't actually talk about it that way. And I don't know enough paleontology. Right? I just don't. That's not my area. I'm interested in dinosaurs and stuff, but not. I'm interested in them the same way like a 10-year-old is. That's the extent of my knowledge.
Well, dinosaurs are cool. Dinosaur artifacts, the history of our planet, the fact that we exist on a continuum of species that have lived on the planet Earth for the past, what do they say, 4 to 5 billion years is about how old our planet is, give or take.
Yeah.
So.
But for me, what I love is Gary Larson came up with this term. It was a good joke. It's funny. It still makes me laugh 40 odd years later. And then people in the discipline, it's like, yeah, I need a name for that. Yeah, that'll work. He named it. Let's just go with that. And now it's in the academic environment. It's there. That's the name people are calling this thing, which I just think is like, who named the word tooth? who named the word hand, right? We know who named the word Thagomizer. So while silly, it still makes me laugh, and I enjoyed it.
Well, it's whimsical, and it shows that culture and science and the life of the mind are all pretty widely connected and sometimes weirdly connected. And it's the glitches and the ticks that make us humans individually and collectively. So I think that this is a really nice, thoughtful, funny kind of way to frame the discussion about names and how we go about calling things what we call them, right?
Yeah. So that's basically all I have, except for the word, question, phrase of the podcast.
All right.
Mind if I jump in?
Please do.
Cool. Word of the podcast is Thagomizer, because I want to say it as many times as possible, so the algorithm picks it up. So
we might be on record for using that word more than any other podcast episode thus far.
That's right. That's where we're at. Question of the podcast: how do names impact learning? And awesome. I think we started to talk about that, and I'm just hoping people think about it a little more, because
Fantastic.
It matters so much. Now, with phrases of the podcast, we've got 3. I like your 2, and I think mine's ridiculous, but we got 3. One is the notion of technology. What does that even mean now?
Awesome.
And I love the way you put that together, because that could be the tagline for the last 96 episodes.
Really, though.
Yeah. And repeating a theme of lifelong learning throughout the show. So again, the one that just ties everything together. We could have put that in a bunch. And my phrase of the podcast is the floppy cloud, because I just wanted to record it someplace. So I'll start using that. Maybe that'll catch on. But that's what I got.
Not unlike the interwebs. If it doesn't exist properly, it should, right? That's
absolutely
awesome. Well, I've certainly enjoyed this discussion, and do be sure, wherever and however you're catching this video or audio, from wherever it lurks within the floppy cloud, as it were, that you do visit our website, also available in another quadrant of the floppy cloud, and you can see all the visuals. You can see the word, question, and phrases of the podcast, as well as all the various other episodes leading up to this. So I certainly have enjoyed our time together. Doug, as always, appreciated the opportunity to speak to Thagomizers and other matters of significance. Anything else you wanted to add here, my friend?
Nothing. It's have a great night and enjoy the day after daylight savings time. It's I know that there's a lot of medical impacts the day after. It's just tough for people. So take care. See you next time.
Absolutely. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.